Things that really interest me about this, Bruce, and that I would love to talk to some of these pastors about is I understand they're saying, well, they're preaching what's in the Bible and saying that, it talks about killing gay people or men who lie with men. But also in the Bible, it talks about killing people who have committed adultery. It talks about killing children or kids who curse against their parents. You don't hear pastors calling for the death of adulterers. Why?
Well, let me just take even a step back before I get to that, Anderson, and say, this in some ways is not a new thing at all. I mean,
right.
they're basically, ever since there's been religion in America, there have been two camps. One is the kind of letter of the Bible camp, and one is the spirit of the Bible camp. And whatever has been the hot button social issue of the day, we've seen it take place. So in the 19th century, it was slavery. People said the Bible, Abraham had slaves. There are laws about slavery. Jesus does nothing.
So people used the Bible to support slavery back in slavery days.
The majority of people used the Bible to support slavery, and in some ways it was a better argument because the Bible does talk about it. The rival camp said, well, we're all created in God's image, and so we should be more compassionate to all people. So that happened in the 19th century in slavery. It happened in the 20th century with women's rights and also with civil rights. So what is the hot button social issue of the day? It is gay rights, civil unions, gay marriage, and so now we're seeing the same battle. You have letter of the Bible camp. It says it in several places in the Bible that God condemns homosexuality. And you've got the spirit of the Bible saying, but yes, we should be compassionate. We're all God's children, and we should be compassionate to people, whatever their beliefs.
Do you think because it's become such a hot button issue with same-sex marriage now in a number of states,
yes,
that it sort of revived this? Or is it just the prevalence of cell phones now that people are recording this?
I actually think it's the second point. I think that's a really good point that's being missed here. Again, if you put this in the terms of war, strategically, the same battles have been going on for a long time. What's different now is the tactics. I mean, why are we talking about this on CNN right now? In all likelihood, because what we're seeing, and we certainly saw this in North Carolina, you're seeing pro-gay rights groups trolling the internet, going to the websites of these churches in these small towns, plucking these things out and percolating up through social media. Because think about this again. Let's talk about politics for a second, because that's something you talk about a lot and your audience knows a lot about. If you're a church and you're in rural Indiana like this one, rural North Carolina, rural Georgia where I grew up, and you got a choice, okay? You can either play to the middle, go to the independents out there, the people who are interested in moderate positions in the spirit of the Bible, or you can play to your base. So why are we seeing this on churches? Because they're playing to their base. Because if you're in rural North Carolina, most of the people that you're talking to are believers in this letter of the Bible camp, even though that's the minority position.
Does that then take me to the question I originally asked, which is why aren't pastors then calling for the death of people who have committed adultery or had affairs or cursed their parents? Is it because more people in those church pews among their congregation fit into that camp of people who maybe have had an affair? I mean, a lot of people in the United States have had affairs.
We're really talking about only two passages in the Bible that really talk about homosexuality. And by the way, I'll note for the record, lesbians are not talked about. The Hebrew Bible does not mention women having sex with other women. It's just men on men. So the pastor in North Carolina said we should put the lesbians behind the fence. That's just made up. But you're talking about essentially Romans 1, which is what that boy was singing about, and particularly a passage in the book of Leviticus, Leviticus 20, that, as you said, absolutely correctly, it says if you speak ill against your parents, if you're having an affair, if you lie with a man, then you will be put to death, is what the language said. I mean, first of all, the Bible is obsessed with sexuality.
Right. Deuteronomy also talks about promiscuous young girls can be put to death.
If the number of people in America who fall under that category, it's probably 200 million Americans. I mean, we know that about adultery, whatever, a third of Americans have adultery. I checked the numbers even this afternoon. So they are cherry picking what they want to address their own social needs, because they are basically trying to, what are they in the business of doing? They're in the business of trying to support their church, and this is what's appealing to the people in those seats.
I tweeted about this, and I get some tweets back from people saying, well, this is what Jesus talked about in the Bible. My reading the Bible is Jesus never talked about this.
Jesus did not talk about this. The passage in the Bible in the Romans is a letter from Paul. There is not a quote where Jesus talks about homosexual sex or...
And was greater emphasis put on homosexuality than on adultery?
No, because well, that was the point I was trying to make earlier, which is sexuality is a big deal in the Bible. The first thing God says to humans is be fruitful and multiply. If you think of circumcision, which is a key plank in the Hebrew Bible, that is essentially God inserting himself in the sexual act. So all the begetting and begatting in the genealogy. So the Bible is obsessed with sex, who's having it with whom, and that's why there is this very strict language about homosexuality, but it's really only in a few scant places.